DFS sports and what makes one unique versus another. The goal is always to be learning and how to use effectively how to use pro level tools to compete like a pro in DFS to take down tournaments. So the big thing with MLB that differentiates it pretty much from all other sports is just how much correlation and stacking are the keys to success. We're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about the two different sites and how to use the Domination Station Optimizer from DFS Army, of course, to create stacked lineups, how to pick your stacks, how to pick your pitchers, all of that stuff, and effectively giving yourself a shot at taking these tournaments down. Now, one of the things you might be surprised to know is, the vast majority of the field entering MLB tournaments, the vast majority of the individual entrants are not necessarily professional players. MLB players in DFS, though, they've been doing it for a while. Like, this is not new, but they're not necessarily professional DFS players. The professional players are the guys that can afford to max enter 150 lineups in your $15 and $20 contests every single day. I mean, that takes a massive bankroll because the swings are insane. But the vast majority of players are just casuals. And not everybody fully grasps the concepts of correlation, stacking, why to stack, how to stack. So let's get into all of that to get started. Now, when you compare FanDuel to DraftKings, DraftKings allows for 5-3 stacks, 5 players from one team, 3 players from another team. FanDuel allows the maximum for 4 stacks, 4 from each team. So that is one differentiator between those two sites. FanDuel's salaries are a little bit more forgiving, and especially the biggest difference for me, and I think why I would personally recommend for most people focusing your energy on FanDuel. I'm going to show a few different reasons why you want to do that, but primarily FanDuel only needs you to pick one pitcher. It takes a little bit of the decision-making power out of it. So I want to first talk about how to pick your pitchers, and then we're going to talk about how to set up team stacking, how to pick the teams, and then we're going to put it all together and show you how to build some MLB stack lineups. But just for conversational purposes, one of the big differences between pitchers and hitters in MLB is how much more projectable pitchers are. They're not necessarily correlated to other players on their own team, slightly, but not necessarily correlated. They do have some correlation, negative correlation, significant negative correlation to players on the opposing team. And of course, one of the rules we have in the Domination Station Optimizer DFS Army is unless you purposefully tell the optimizer to allow a pitcher versus an opposing batter, it will not do that. So you don't have to worry about that too much. There is an option on the optimizer that allows you to allow pitcher versus hitter, but that's only something you'd ever want to do in really, really short slates like a turbo or a 2 or 3 game slate where maybe a pitcher still is in the winning lineup against hitters that they might face, 1 or 2 hitters that they might face. So with pitching, projections are generally fairly accurate. So you're just really looking at, it's really easy to actually project a pitcher because we're looking at their win odds, their win probability, but primarily looking at how many strikeouts and how many runs they generally give up and how many strikeouts they are projected by the sports books to achieve in that game. And so it's kind of not that hard to pick out pitchers. I mean, some of the tools we have at DFS Army, of course, the research station in particular, will show you things like how often, how the frequency that an opposing team strikes out against lefties, strikes out against righties, and all that. So we have plenty of tools, particularly in the research station, where you can do your own research and pick out your own pitchers. But of course, the projection generally tells most of the tale, and our coaches are bringing that forward to you in cheat sheets every week, kind of pointing out which pitchers are the better pitchers for a given slate. Picking a pitcher is a combination of ceiling, mean projection, and ownership. So our goal in DFS tournaments is always to get as much ceiling as we can, combined with as little ownership as possible. That's the most simplistic approach. And my approach to MLB and winning MLB tournaments is also very, very simple. Stack teams, right? MLB more than every other sport, if you think about how it works, when a player gets a hit on a team, what happens, right? Another player gets an at bat. Now, another player gets a hit on a team. There's another extra at bat. So for every run scored, for every hit allowed in an MLB game, what's happening is every other player in that offense is getting additional opportunities to drive in runs, opportunities to get more hits, walks, anything that scores points, RBIs, to be driven in, runs scored. Those are the stats that score points in baseball DFS and MLB DFS. And it's important to understand that because as the mean projection that you see on a hitter is almost meaningless. And I'm going to show you again how to deal with that in the optimizer, but it's almost meaningless because that is a projection based on a certain pitcher who's only going to probably be in the game for 5 innings. It's a mean outcome for a player with a wide range of outcomes. Every hitter, for the most part. Now, of course, some are better than others, but they all have a range of outcomes between 0, which is they didn't get a hit, to generally somewhere in the 30 plus fantasy points range because they hit a home run, they get driven in, whatever. They had a great game. And those things are affected by how many at-bats they have, the quality of the opposing pitcher, which does help in terms of the research. But also, hey, when a team starts scoring and the tornado of fantasy points starts to happen, so many things happen. So many things are happening that help that hitter's outcome that their mean projection before the game just becomes irrelevant. I'll give you an example. Let's say a starting pitcher is getting blown up within the first 3 innings of a game, right? And you've stacked the starting lineup against that pitcher. Well, that pitcher got blown up. So 3-4 runs scored. That means you've probably already been through the lineup 2 or 3 times within 2 or 3 innings, right? So extra at bats. But wait, there's more, right? That's not it. That's not all of the bonus or the benefits. Now that pitcher comes out, the team is like, we're toast in this game anyway. They bring in, quote unquote, the long reliever, right? What is the long reliever? He's kind of a starting pitcher that's just not good enough to be a starter, right? So he's your long relief. Well, now all of those hitters get to face like an even worse pitcher. So more likelihood for more runs scored, more hits, and all of that good stuff. So the first rule of MLB DFS is always have a big stack. And the big stack on DraftKings is going to be a 5-man stack. And the big stack on FanDuel is going to be a 4-person stack, right? You always want to pretty much fill out as many players in that stack as you can. Why? Again, because a lesser hitter will project better when the rest of his team is crushing in a particular game. So you want all of that upside. The second rule is really to trust the pitching. For the most part, pitching projections or pitcher projections are, let's go up here, are very predictable. Meaning, much like NBA, where we have the accuracy of projections is very, very high compared to other sports. MLB hitter projections are not accurate almost at all, but pitching projections are fairly accurate, and you'll see a standard bell curve distribution of scores. Most of the time, pitching is fairly predictable. So we want to stick with what the projections are telling us with pitchers, of course, balanced out against ownerships. And I'll give you an example of that. Let's pull up this particular slate, and I'll give you an example of balanced out against ownership. So I'm going to sort this by fantasy points, right? And we're going to look at the pitchers, and this is just a random slate I picked out from last year. We're going to use this for our examples for this video. And in a minute, I'm going to show you how to create these stacked lineups. And we also have to deal with the potential for one-offs. So we're going to get into everything here, how to crush MLB DFS in 2024. Right, but take a look here. So we've got, I'm going to look for 2 pitchers with a similar outlook, but very different ownerships. Here we go. Here's a random one, right? Michael King, 12.4 fantasy points and a projection. But this guy is projecting for 38% ownership. Okay. Well, here's a guy, Fernando Tatis. Oh, well, that's already a hitter. So no, it's got to stick with our pitchers. Hold on. There we go. So we got a 38% owned Michael King, right? But let's say Ryan Feltner on the same slate, 10.5 fantasy points. All right, a little bit lower, but virtually unowned. Neither one of these pitchers was projected to win their game. And this is a bad chalk alert. I don't know what ended up happening with him. Yeah, he scored okay. He scored 19. So in the end, he did all right. But these are the types of situations you might want to say, I don't know about that, right? He's not projected to win the game. He's plus 150 to win. And, the projection's fairly low, and there's other pitchers that are going to be lower owned. I'll give another example would be, Adrian Hauser here, who's slightly higher projected, but much lower owned. So here we go. Super low owned Bobby Miller, 3% owned, put up 30 points and was the nuts pitcher at almost no ownership. So with pitching, we want to balance projection, which you could see here is fairly accurate, but we want to balance that out with ownership leverage. Here's another one. Okay, here at the very, very top of this slate, I'll give you another great example. Kevin Gausman here was projecting for 22 points at 11.5. He was going to be wildly high owned, 42% ownership. The next highest priced pitcher, Bailey Ober, relatively speaking, was actually a better fantasy points per dollar play. So his projection at 20 was worth 2.2 fantasy points per dollar, while Kevin Gausman, he was projected for 1.97 fantasy points per dollar. So you're paying more, right? The end result, you're paying more money for Kevin Gausman at a worse value, and he ends up producing a 22.75, where Bailey Ober at lower ownership for a cheaper price, but a higher projected value, puts up 30 fantasy points. So always balance projection with ownership at the pitcher spot, but we don't want to completely ignore value and high projections and all of those type of things. So we want to still stick pretty chalky at the pitcher position. One of the things that makes DraftKings, I would say, a little trickier than FanDuel is navigating the requirement that you have two pitchers in every single lineup. Most people end up choosing kind of one expensive and one cheap one. I find that whole navigation to be very tricky, but I will say if you're using the optimizer to kind of create lineups just for you, I strongly suggest using the coach's recommended pitching plays and controlling for your pitcher exposure. You don't really want, I don't agree with the idea of allowing the projections to fully control your pitcher selections. You want to control the exposures using the min-max settings. So we'll show how to do that in a minute. Now let's get into stacking. We talked about DraftKings and FanDuel being a little bit different. So there's a couple different types of stacks you can do on DraftKings, but I always 100% of the time recommend starting with a 5-something stack. So the few stack, what I've just opened up here is the Domination Station optimizer. And you can see users get a choice of a number of different stacks, right? And then we're going to get into how you choose your teams. But you get a choice of a number of different stacks across both FanDuel and DraftKings. I suggest sticking with any one of these three options. So you have your 5-3 stacks, which will fill out the entire lineup fully stacked. And then your 5-2 stack, which should be the bread and butter for most of us. And then 5X, meaning 5 and then 3 one-offs on your stack. Now, the reason that 5-2 rather than 5, I love 5-3. I like getting the whole lineup stacked. The problem is stacking an entire lineup and then picking two pitchers that perfectly match. What ends up happening more often than not is the requirements get too tight and you can't find good lineups, or you're leaving too much salary on the table just because of the way positions work in MLB DFS and the way salaries work. So I prefer 5-2 stacks on DraftKings, primarily because it gives you that flexibility with that last spot to put in either a value play or some one-off that you kind of like. The lineups tend to look a little bit better with 5-2 stacks, but I like 5-3 as well, especially if you're handcrafting and just can make the numbers work. Sometimes it's difficult because, the two teams the way salaries work out, there's only one shortstop on each team, that kind of thing. And if they're both expensive. So, when you do one stack, for example, your 5-person stack, and you've used up the shortstop and the second baseman and the first baseman, right? And an outfielder spot. Well, when you get to the second team, now you only have a few spots left. So it doesn't come out as advantageous as you would hope because you only have certain choices left when you get to team 2. So how do we set up our stacks, FanDuel or DraftKings? Well, one of the first things I recommend doing is raising up your hitter randomization number significantly. So on the Domination station, you can set hitter randomization and pitcher randomization separately. So I recommend going very high with hitter randomization. The reason being that, again, the mean projections that come with batters just aren't particularly helpful, or they're not particularly predictive. They will show, for example, one player is better than the other. So the mean projection has its uses. It's going to favor the hitter in the 4-hole. He'll get a higher mean projection compared to like an 8th or 9th place batter. So there is some positive that comes from that. But for the most part, we want to go heavy with the randomization and allow for the fact that there is extreme variance with batters in MLB. So we're going to go really high with our hitter randomization. Pitcher randomization, I don't really like to mess with it too much. I'm going to control my pitcher exposures using min-max controls, generally max limits, right? From here, we're going to allow 0 hitters against opposing pitchers. So we're not going to use this for the most part. Server mode to speed up the optimization. How many uniques per lineup? So this option here on the optimizer will just simply describe how many uniques, how many players have to change between lineup 1, lineup 2, lineup 3, and so on and so forth. This will help with diversifying your lineup exposures, right? So I usually like to go 3 unique players per lineup, and we can go optimal tournament mode. Doesn't really matter as much for MLB. I'm just going to leave it in optimal mode for now because I don't use a lot of optimal mode is something that exclusively works with max limits, and I don't use a lot of max limits in MLB DFS, although tournament mode's fine as well. I said if we're going to use it, so I'll leave it on tournament mode. That's fine. Okay, now we're going to choose our stack type. And again, my favorite to use are the 5-2 stacks because it just gives the optimizer the more flexibility to pick a one-off that's either a real stud if there's lots of salary left over or a dud if not. Now, how do we choose what teams to stack? You can allow the optimizer to do it, but again, it's being fed specifically value options. So it's going to choose teams with lower cost players with slightly higher slightly higher projections to stack. I don't agree with that approach. Again, I believe the correct way is to control for the teams that you're going to choose for stacks. Now, there's a lot of different ways to do this, and you as the user have a ton of control. So if you're, for example, looking at the cheat sheet here, which is empty because we are in the preseason, and one of the coaches is recommending particular teams to stack for various reasons. You want to use a couple of those. That's a great way to go. Those are vetted. There's a reason. You can even choose if you want to pick some of the batters that you're going to allow to be in the stacks. I normally don't do too much of that. I just stack a team. I don't care which hitters are being used, but you can also kind of narrow that down by hitters. So you can just go by recommended stacks. Another great way to pick teams. We have a few more tools for this, right? Another one is our leverage stacking tool. So the leverage stacking tool will compare value and total ownership of a particular stack and rank it against the field. So this will give you the best leverage stacks to play against the field when this is live. And then, of course, they're simply looking at the projected team totals for each team. this is the simplest and probably the most effective way to create your stacks. If you take a look here, you see the Domination Station has game boxes for every single game. And when you look at these boxes, one of the stats that you see is IRT, or implied run total. So this takes the Vegas odds and Vegas game totals for a particular game and breaks it down to implied run totals. And when you look at the implied run totals, you can simply sort by the highest numbers. So looking at the screen right now, I could see the Dodgers on this particular slate had a 6.95 implied run total, which is massive. They're in Colorado. That's always the highest owned stack, Colorado, the thin air of Colorado and all the home runs that happen there. So you're going to get tons and tons of Dodgers stacks on a slate like this. I would also be looking at the 4.79. So the Rockies would be in play. Here's the Arizona is in play here with a 4.96 implied run total, even the White Sox. So for me, I'd probably look at a board like this, and I would force all of the teams above an implied run total of 4 into lineups. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, maybe 13, maybe 13 teams out of the, let's see, out of the 22. So maybe 14 teams out of the 22. And here's how we set up the stack. So again, this is a personal preference thing. How many? So if I'm going to run 150 lineups in a large field or even a small field tournament, now I'm going to explain why I like the ones on FanDuel in a second. I'm going to show you some reasons why. But if I'm setting that up, what I'm going to do is go ahead and force some exposures on the teams that I want. So let's see here. We got Rockies, Dodgers, Texans, Cubs, right? Rockies, Dodgers. So we're going to just find these teams. Dodgers were the highest implied, so I might give them 20%. Colorado got a nice, so we'll give them 10%. Texans, 10%. And these numbers will vary based on the size of the slate and how much total exposure you have to spread around. So as you see here, as I'm typing in a forced min for each individual team on stack 1, which will be the large stack, we've gotten to 40%. I'm going to go back up here. We like the Twins. We like Milwaukee. So we'll get them in there as well. San Diego and San Francisco. So let's see. Minnesota. We'll go 12. Milwaukee. 12. What did I say? San Diego. And you do have to scroll up and down and or write this down beforehand. So I don't want to get too crazy with this, but I think I saw Tampa up there as a good one. We'll give them 10. We're at 74%. Remember, we got to dole out somewhere close to 100%, or it's going to simply pick stacks for us, and I don't want to do that. So let's see. Angels, 5%. I don't remember what other teams might have been. Minnesota. Yeah, we got the Angels, Arizona, Giants, and San Diego. Let's do Giants and San Diego. We'll close it out, right? And you're going to go lower. As the implied run total goes down, you're going to go lower and lower in the percentage that you're forcing. And there we go. So I've effectively forced 95% of stack 1. So I've controlled for stack 1. And that's really, really important. Stack 2, a lot of different ways to do it. You might just force a min of a certain amount on each team. Again, I don't love doing that. You could do it on smaller slates, but we want to get a little more unique with the second stack. We want to be a little different, especially in lineups where the first stack is the chalk. This particular slate, we already know that the Dodgers are going to be super chalk. So we want to make sure that in stacks the Dodgers are paired up with. It's not super chalky. So I don't necessarily love doing this, but we can just start with a min exposure for each team of 2%. And what I can do here is a max exposure of 10%, making sure that we get a nice little spread of all of these secondary teams. So I'm going to show you again after this some other ways that we can also check the different stacks we do. Understand the most key component to stacking for MLB DFS. If two teams go bananas on a particular night and score 14, 15 runs, that does happen fairly frequently. Not just one, but two of them do it. it's really important for us, if we're going to win the tournament, that we have both of those teams stacked in our lineups. That's how you win. So making sure we get a variation of team 1 versus team 2 is going to be really, really important. So I'm going to give this a run. We're at 3 uniques. Total hit randomization. Stacking is on. We're all set. We're going to set our max exposures. I haven't controlled for pitcher yet. We'll do that. I'll show you how to do that at the end. But from here, we're going to give this a run and do our work, right? 3 lineups. Actually, we need more than 3. So let's set this for 50 lineups. And then I'm going to show you guys some other features here on the Domination station that allow you to take it to the next step, to control for your overall exposures, control for your pitcher exposures, and then really finish up your lineup. So the first thing I want to show here, we've done a run and we've got all these beautiful stacked lineups. Check out this one, Dodgers. This is a Dodgers Giants, right? Here's Dodgers, Oakland. You're going to get a lot of Dodgers stacks here, of course, but here's San Francisco and Houston. A nice little variation. So we have these amazing tabs here in the exposures box that you can go to understand, all right, how much of each team did I get? And ooh, it loves San Francisco. So it looks like what I see happen here, because we didn't force a ton of San Francisco in stack A, was that San Francisco must have great value bats on their team. And so it forced a ton of San Francisco in the open stack, in the 5% of lineups that we didn't account for in the big stack. And it probably just filled them up to 15% on the small stack. So we can control for that if we don't want it. Dodgers, San Diego, all the teams here that we forced. If I decide that I don't want that much San Francisco, this is a spot where I can control for that. So I can simply type in 10% max, and that will cause San Francisco not to appear in any more than 10% of my lineups. But I want to show you the next tab, which is also really, really important. Here's your stacks in stack 1 and stack 2. So we can control for stack 1 and stack 2 right here in this screen. And then the combinations might be the most important tab of all. This shows the team combinations of various stacks. So you see the top stack that we got was San Diego, LA. Well, we also got more of these stacks. 8% of our lineups are this exact stack. So if I don't want to have 8% of my lineups all focused on this one stack, I want to get a better variation, I can simply set a max limit. 5%. That means I won't get more effectively on this run than 2 lineups with Dodgers, San Francisco. I'm going to show you another pretty interesting tool that we have here, which is randomly select teams. So when you use this, the optimizer will first pick the team that it's going to use and pick the second team in your stack, and then it's going to figure out which players project the best in that lineup. So if I give this a run, we should see slightly different numbers and a lot of different combinations. Now, we've already controlled for the min on the large stack. So even with randomly selecting teams, it cannot choose from teams that we don't have set. We haven't set a forced min exposure on, but it can just randomly select from stack 2, which I don't mind. And if there's a team I hate, I can just uncheck them here in the stack so it won't choose them. Now, when you do that, what should happen is, yes, we get a much more diversified set of stacks here of combinations. So you're hitting way more combinations than we did in the first run. So, I mean, when you're running 100, only 50, it doesn't look as good. But if we ran 150 lineups like this, essentially designed to attack a tournament, you're going to see how nice and diversified these lineups are. So we're going to have a great set of team 1 versus team 2, and it just increases the chances that you're going to fall on the combination of 2 teams in a couple of lineups that score 12, 14, double-digit runs on that particular night, and that's what we need. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the difference between FanDuel and DraftKings, not just from a the way it plays out perspective. Here we go. So we did the team randomization. You can see here, look at all these combinations. Like so many of these are just one off. Now, of course, we want to cut down on the total number of options. So, I think we do better in a concept like this to look at some of the teams with the lowest implied run totals and just say, you know what, I'm just not going to mess with them. So that would be the Yankees on this particular slate. The Mets. Oh, the Masons. Yankees, the Mets. They're 3.16, 3.68. We can get rid of those. The Oakland, we can get rid of them. Houston probably can get rid of them. So we're going to get rid of Houston. We're going to get rid of Oakland. Houston. Oakland. Yankees, get them out, right? So we're going to cut down some of these options. You can't play everything. What else? Let's actually have a little fun and see what we score on this thing. But yeah, Yankees got rid of Mets. So we got rid of a few more teams. Let's look at the highest score by Final Fantasy points that we got in this run. So far, the highest scoring team we got was a 162 on that last run. Let's give it another run now that I pulled some teams out of there. So we did a 162 on the last one. Let's see what happens here. Yeah, and as you can see here, pulling a few teams out of there that were at the bottom, raised our Final Fantasy point total here to 168. So a little bit of improvement. That's the actual results of this contest. So a little bit of positive results there. So key takeaways so far. Control for pitchers. Set up your stacks and make sure to attack the big stack with a diverse group of high implied run total teams. Understanding that correlation is king in MLB DFS. Let me try one other little change here. So in this last run, we set all our lineups at 5-2, right? And our best score was 168.8. So I'm going to change this and change this back to 0. And we're going to go to 5-3 stacks, and we're going to set that one for 100%. Again, you as the user control everything on the Domination Station Optimizer. I really believe this is the strongest tool for attacking MLB DFS, and more so for giving you, the user, maximum control. There are other sites out there that are pushing, let's call it simulated contests as the primary approach, and that's fine, but it's really just creating stacked lineups, exactly the same, but with less user control. So what I like is you as the user can control for which teams are going to show up in the 5-person stack or the 3 or the 2. Let's see what happened. 164 3/4. So did not much improvement, really almost the same result, going from 5-3 to 5-2 in this particular contest. I didn't pre-check that. I just wanted to see, but of course you can make 5-3 and 5-2. I just want to kind of look at what happens. So when you set your 5-3 stack, what you end up with, and this is always the concern, is our lineups that leave a ton of salary on the table because, it's forcing in that third. So it did go down a little bit. And I kind of agree that, again, 5-2 should be more flexible. Now, comparing the two sites, I want to show you just the contests that you have available to you on FanDuel versus DraftKings. And then just generally, FanDuel's going to be easier to win on. So I've got, MLB opening day is right around the corner. Thursday, it looks like, and as I'm recording this on Tuesday. And if you take a look at the lobby for MLB on FanDuel, here you see, here's a quarter game, right? So 25, the wiffle ball, there we go. A nickel game, 140,000 entries, 5 cents per entry. Now, why am I talking about a nickel game? Because, hey, for most people, you're not going to be able to afford a $10, a $15, a $20 per entry giant tournament unless you've been doing DFS for the last 10 years and you've got a system down. And quite honestly, those people are probably not watching this video, right? So for a more casual player that wants to get into mass multi-entry, that wants to get into attacking big tournaments, don't know what you're doing, I always suggest starting at lower cost entry contests. So the wiffle ball costs $7.50 to max out. Prove that you can win it. a couple times using these tools before you move up to the next contest level. You've got the pinch hit. I think this one might be 150 entries as well at a quarter, $37.50 to max out this tournament and put 150 lineups into it. Give yourself a chance to win. As a bonus, these lower cost contests, they actually don't have the sharkiest people in them, meaning a lot of the lineups are really suboptimal. They're not even stacked. So you get a much better shot at actually winning one of these. But across the board on FanDuel, bonus, like here's the rally $4 entry, which is nice. Okay, $4. Here's a $2.22 contest. So you have a much wider range of salaries to or contest entry fees to attack. Now, my DraftKings screen will not show the cheapest of contests. And there's probably a mini max that we can attack on this tournament. So there's probably a 50 cent or $1 game. And if you're going to do DraftKings, I strongly recommend that one, because DraftKings, what they do is they really jump the salary up from that mini max contest that they have, which will be a nickel, 50 cents or $1 to enter. Then they have a 20 max $4 contest. But if you want to do 150 outside of the mini max, you've got to go all the way up to $15. And again, if you're maxing out a $15 contest, that is something that is going to get really, really expensive in a hurry. This contest has 39,200 entrants. So understanding your win odds in a contest like that are really important. Your chances, if you just go into this contest blind, your chances of winning are 1 in 39,200, 1 in 39,200 for every lineup that you put in there. If you build amazing, beautiful, well-projected, fully correlated lineups, you will increase your chance of winning by as much as 50%. Great. Wow, that means I'm going to win every day. Not exactly. What that means is instead of a 1 in 39,000 shot of winning, you've got a, 1.5 in 39,000 shot of hitting, or a 1 in 20,000 chance, or 25,000. In other words, you can increase your odds of winning, but you're still probably not going to win very often. You're lucky to have a few wins over the course of an entire season, a few first place takedowns, or a handful, right? If you're doing it amazing and a little bit of luck is on your side. So second reason that I think FanDuel is definitely a preferred site for me if you're newer or you don't want to swim with the Sharks. And the second reason is you only have to pick one pitcher. That may not seem like a big deal, but with salaries a little bit softer on FanDuel, followed by the fact that you really only need to pick one pitcher, it's fewer decisions to make, fewer things that maybe sharper players will get an edge on you with. This allows you to compete on a level playing field. You're already using pro level tools with the Domination Station Optimizer. You're already doing the right thing, which is stacking and correlation as your primary concern in MLB. And we're going to stick to FanDuel. And then, of course, use the tips from the coaches at DFS Army on which pitchers are the most ideal to use. They're accounting for ownership. They're accounting for projection. They're accounting for opponent. So those tips from the sharps in DFS Army who are giving out the core plays go a long way to helping you choose this stuff. Now, again, very simple with your stacking. How you picking your stacks? You're simply going to either look at the leverage stack sheet, look at the coaches' sheets to which teams stack the best, or look at the implied run totals for all these teams and pick the teams with the highest implied run totals. They will be highly owned. So there are times when you might want to just leave off, like if there's a Dodgers team that's just standing out massively above, and let's see, let me just sort by ownership projections, right, across the hitters. So I'm going to go to hitters. I'm going to sort by ownership projections. And I would assume that most of the top, like the top 3 Dodgers hitters are all projecting for the most ownership. In this particular slate, fading that chalk wouldn't have worked out very well. Freddie Freeman and Max Muncy absolutely smashed, put up nice numbers, but Will Smith, the catcher from the Dodgers, who is also very, very expensive and whatever, he put up a dud. Here, looks like Arizona, you needed Christian, Walker, and maybe if you had your 2 off of Walker and Curtel Mart on Arizona, that would have worked out really nicely for you. And they were fairly high owned as well. So that's the basics of how to smash MLB DFS in 2022. If you're going to handcraft a lineup, so if you're not attacking a large field tournament, but you're simply looking to attack smaller field tournaments, I'll kind of point something out on screen. Something like a smaller field is not really, these are still large field tournaments, by the way, even 6, 7, 800, 900 entries. But if we get to a smaller field tournament, well, here's a $75 one. Where was that? That looked pretty good. Good example. Yeah. Or how, no, not a double up. We want tournaments. I want a smaller one. Yeah, here we go. Upper Deck. So if we're going to make a lineup in a smaller contest, the same strategies apply, but to a slightly lesser extent. You still want to 5-stack a team. You still want to pick. You really want to actually focus more on the pitchers here and make sure you lock in really good pitching. Pitching is much more consistent than hitting, so you want to lock in those points. And then with your team stacks, you want to maybe get off the chalk just a little bit. So if it was the Dodgers this particular week, and you on that particular week that we're talking about here, if the Dodgers were the optimal stack, like everybody was going to play them, and a couple of their guys, two of their hitters did really well, but not all. Well, if you would have just shifted over to Arizona was projected still really good at 4.9. I think they still had a solid projection. So I'd be looking to shift over to one of these other teams, maybe not the most obvious stack, but maybe the second best or the third best, the Braves or the Texans or Arizona. I'd be looking to maybe be a little bit different, get a little contrarian, so that you can avoid, because in these smaller contests, the field is going to be a lot sharper. They're going to be on the best play. So you want to sort of leverage that, understanding that, if the Dodgers are 6.9 implied run total, everybody's going to be on the Dodgers. So what can I do to be different, even in an 80-person contest? Because remember, or 150-person contest, as I'm showing on screen here, because remember, our goal is always to win the tournament. The last item of note, when you're done optimizing your lineups, you've looked through your teams, your team exposures, you've controlled for that, you've controlled for your combinations, you've decided on whether you want to use random select of teams or allow the projections to drive the team selections, all of that stuff. When you're ready to go, you're going to download these lineups and, of course, upload them to DraftKings or FanDuel to lineups where you had pre-reserved contest. Now, with MLB, the final factor is weather and game postponement. So one of the things we have in DFS Army is the weather station. In addition to the weather station, which you can find right here on the weather station tab, it will show you the likelihood of teams. Let's see if it's even, what it's showing right now. It should be pretty blank. There it is. It's not much going on there, right? But it will show you air density, some hitter. It'll give you a rating for hitters, a rating for the pitchers. Is it good? Is it bad? But of course, the most important part being postponement or in-game postponement risk. If there's any sort of risk of a game getting stopped by rain in game, you want to avoid the pitchers from that game in particular. If there's much risk of a postponement of a game, I generally just avoid that game, right? But if you're going to play it, make sure that you are by the computer all night long. And if that game gets postponed or shut down, understand you might take a bunch of zeros or you might need to late swap. Of course, late swapping is no problem when you have the Domination Station Optimizer. It is fairly easy to do, but that will be for another video, as I need it to be live in order to late swap. So you have a weather station here. Always check the weather station and make sure you're in the Discord for DFS Army subscribers. In our Discord, we are constantly monitoring weather conditions, calling out, tagging the channel if you need to do a swap out, or if we have really Joey Tornado, one of the best in the business, best weathermen in the business, just giving us warnings. Like, we have a full-time employed weatherman in DFS Army to help us out with these situations. So take advantage of it. If you subscribe, if you don't subscribe to DFS Army, make sure you're on, you're finding some good Twitter accounts or something to follow that you can be alerted if a game is going to be postponed. That's going to do it for this one, guys. Good luck this MLB season. If you're not signed up at DFS Army, you can use my promo code. My gift to you, forget it through this video. My code is GEEK, and that will knock 10% off of VIP. VIP is currently sitting at $89.99 a month. Covers all sports, esports, NASCAR, NFL, everything, year-round DFS action. And code GEEK will get you 10% off. Of course, you just want an MLB subscription. You can subscribe for the MLB package as well. I think that's $39.99 per month after the 10% off. That's going to do it for this one. Good luck this season, everybody. I will see you guys in the Discord, and hopefully I'll see you at the top of the leaderboards. Helmets up.